Up to say a few words to share the welcome as well. Move the nearer, come on up.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and we are so very pleased to be representing TD Bank Group, my employer, and perhaps your bank as we officially continue to celebrate African Heritage Month with Halifax Public Libraries. At TD, we proudly support Canadian diversity as we believe that what makes us unique makes us better together. For years, we have celebrated African heritage, supporting artistic projects, cultural events, and a number of community programming initiatives. Traditionally focused in the Halifax Regional Municipality area, we are so pleased to be expanding our footprint and showcasing our support in more and more communities throughout our Atlantic Canada. As our CEO, Bharat Mazarani, has said, we are in the people business. That being the case, TD has always looked to build a unique and inclusive environment where every employee and customer is valued, respected, and supported. We also understand that being the better bank is about more than our financial results. We are committed to being a place where everyone feels welcomed and comfortable, regardless of any aspect of their identity.
Our commitment to diversity and inclusion is not only the right thing to do, it's a business imperative and critical to our success. It's one of the main reasons we can attract the best and brightest people to TD. They come to work or bank with us being who they are. At TD, we believe that nothing brings cultures and communities closer together or creates a better understanding of each other than through the arts. While this reading is a special event, it's just one of many fantastic community programming activities taking place this month. Many cultures, one celebration. TD invites you to come celebrate with us. Meet our people, visit our community partners, and experience TD in the community firsthand. Let the celebrations begin.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thanks,
you.
Nira. Thank you, TD Bank. There's more programs coming up for African Heritage Month, this branch in particular. Tomorrow night, there's Speak Up, a program about representing community issues to the media, and there'll be journalists from CBC and the Chronicle Herald talking us through how to talk about community issues, a training camp if you like. And on Saturday, there's a lecture by Isaac Saini from Dalhousie on Black Consciousness Rising about Pan-Africanism and the wars. I'm going to hand over to Tracey now, and she can start an evening of enjoyable conversation. And thank you so much for coming. I can't thank you enough. It's a pleasure, and I'll let you introduce Walter because I couldn't do justice to it. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Well, welcome everyone. Can you hear us? Are the microphones picking it up? I know I'm pretty loud, and we know Walter's loud. We're glad that you could join us in our living room style setting for a conversation with Walter and I. Walter is our Nova Scotian. I'm not sure how to describe him. I've always referred to Walter as uncle, because he's been a part of my life for over 50 years. So for me, it's also an honor to be able to sit here and have this conversation with him this evening. Walter is a member of the Order of Nova Scotia and the Order of Canada. Walter has done numerous plays and various bits of activity. And I'm hoping through our conversation this evening, you'll get to know Walter a little bit more and hear his story through his voice and his writings, and we just hope you'll sit back and enjoy. This isn't just going to be me and Walt talking back and forth and back and forth. We're hoping to engage you and involve you in the conversation and just make this a nice night. So sit back and pretend like you're sitting in our living room. It'll be probably our living room on Windsor Street.
Thank you.
And we'll just have the conversation, and as we said at the end of the evening, Gordy, who also was around in my house as I grew up and I called Big G, will entertain us with some music at the end. And Walter is going to open with a piece of his work from Tightrope Time.
What I want is
just before I do that, I do want to say something about the video that's happening this evening. Sorry, Walt, I do want to say a few words. Tonight we're being broadcast on ALI TV, Afrocentric Learning Institute, a product of the Afrocentric Learning Institute of Nova Scotia. The mission of ALI TV is to present a positive visual image of the African Nova Scotian community to the world. We encourage you to check out our news channel and our features and our interviews and our human interest stories from the heart of the community. And I'm very proud to see that ALI TV is here live streaming. And on that note, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Trey. I said to Trey when we were standing outside that I would open with a poem and close with a poem. And both of them are from one man work that I do, Tightrope Time. And the reason that I'm doing it is it's multifold, but basically it's this. I like this setting because, say, it's just like being in a living room. But still, because it is kind of a formal thing, I want to, at least for me, probably for you too, to take it from that strange kind of almost uncomfortable place down to where we really want it to be, which is just a give and take. And I can do that best by saying these words that I wrote. Certainly being here is like old home. I know the area, I know the people, I'm home. And yet it's, I spend a lot of my time away. And with a lot of you, it's been many years since we have actually sat and talked. And a lot has happened in between. And what has happened has shaped me. And I know that. But what I really want to let you know is that I am still the same one who was tromping around 30, 40, 50 years ago. And at certain times I tried to put myself down on a page. Not so much for me, but for people who are constantly asking me about who I am or what I'm doing. And so this will kind of open it up, and then we'll take off from there. This, the interesting thing about the two pieces that I'm going to do, this first piece was written at 2764 Windsor Street in August of 1974. And it's what took off to be Tightrope Time. The second piece that I'll read at the end, which is almost like a bookend, is a character that was never part of Tightrope Time until a couple of years ago, when it hit me that I should say something about who I am now. So really, it's the same character 44 years later, and he's just called Black Man Talking. So he's at the end. This is the host at the beginning, the one you would meet first. And he says, "Well, Mom," I said, "I'm 32 and I feel old." The kitchen had that old-time feeling. You know what I mean? The closest thing to a womb outside the real thing, I felt safe. My head was resting on my arm, which I propped against the warming closet of an oil burner stove. And I thought, transition moves with patience and respect in my mother's kitchen. It knows its place, and that's all right. It makes me feel safe. My mother smoothed the doily, half finished on her lap, expertly, casually, looped the slender threads around her nimble fingers, and then quickly established an enviable rapport with her faithful crochet. "Old," she said.
You got even now?
No, dear. There's lots of things you've yet to learn. You're still just a child. She punctuated that remark with a perfect double chain. My half-cooked egg looked up at me with a limpid, jaundiced eye, then spat some fat on my clean white shirt. I clenched my teeth and groaned, oh shit. My mother shifted slightly in her chair, arched a disapproving brow, and crocheted in triple tie. The unassuming egg gazed on. Some discontented bacon sizzled, squirmed, and shriveled, and snuggled closer to the egg, and I felt safe. The sun will surely rise, I thought, and just as surely set, and in between I have no delusions about the person I know I am. I read the other day that on the open market I'm worth about $5.90, and that's allowing for inflation. But that's all right. I'd hate to think that I was priced beyond accessibility. A second glance reveals, however, a flaw in pigmentation, so there is the possibility that you might have to find me in a reduced for clearance bin. But if by chance it happens that you amble by my way, stop and have a look. There are many mansions in the complex of my mind, and if it were not so, I'd be the first to tell you. If I say, please, come on in, sit a spell, take me at my word. Once inside, please recognize who is keeper of my castle.
Hello.
My mother and the crochet hook rested. The egg benignly indicated that it knew what I was thinking and didn't care to care. Bacon crackled that it was taking too much heat, like a lot of us. A curious fly reined in for a landing on the shoulder, thought about the meal in the pan, and then opted to avoid a closer scrutiny. There are countless chambers in those mountains in my mind, and many I have walked through once and must wander through again, but there are doors unjarred, unnamed, so I have work to do. If you'd like to come along, I'd be pleased to have you company. My mother dozed, hook relaxed, the egg stared, the deck inside. The fly performed the manicure, and I felt safe and not so old. So come with me to the mansions of my mind, where I sing of songs that are written in a minor key, but that does not mean necessarily that I am the singer of sad songs. Boundaries and labels are debilitating limitations which serve at best to lock us within the convenience of others. But conveniently put, I am nature's love child, and freedom is my father. I've been called by many names. I am called by many still, but restless is the name they gave me, and I am fashioned from the wind. Born on some forgotten Friday. It's Friday with a Y, not Friday with an I. The half-past discontent. When Mama sat down on life's sidewalk, spread her legs and pushed when ain't no problem time, and spewed me there where maybe you will chow Boulevard cuts across maybe you won't chow Avenue, and indifference sauntered by to serve as midwife, to wrap me in my soul and say, you are nature's love child, a witness and a messenger, and freedom is your father. You will be called by many names. I am called by many still, but restless is the name they gave me, and I am fashioned from the wind.
Okay, that's the end of our evening. Walter and my story actually began 50 years ago on Barrington Street as a young child when he was in our home there. And when we talked the other day, here we are coming together 50 years later.
Just around the corner.
Just you said when you were just reading from your play, the person that I am. And I'm hoping we'll get to know a little bit more about the person that you are. And so, Walt, I guess, thinking back to 50 years ago and the story that began on Barrington Street, how would you start the story?
Oh my goodness. Street, Cornwallis and Barrington Street was the absolute beginning for me in terms of what I was to become, how I would become it, what I found there over the time that I was there, and of course we kept moving, but the core remained the same. And what I say I found was my whole philosophy was developed because of Nova Scotia Project in Claquacha. There is nothing that I say today, nothing that I do, that does not have its genesis, has its roots in the philosophy that I learned starting in 1965 at Barrington and Cornwallis. Everything. It shaped me. And when I went there, I literally was like a piece of putty. And I was molded. And that doesn't mean to say that I didn't take part in the molding. That was absolutely necessary for anybody who went there to help mold themselves. The main thing was that it provided it provided the space, the support, the ambiance for you to do that. And when you needed the help was there. The other hands were there to help mold you. And this is the result all these many years later.
And as you were molded through that time, and you mentioned the Nova Scotia Project and Kawacha House, and what were those things? What did they do? And what did they do for you and with you?
Okay. Well, you know, so much, a whole book has to be written about the Nova Scotia Project. And it hasn't been done, and it really must be done. Sometimes we have talked about it over the years. Certainly Joan and I have talked about it. We even have a title for the whole thing. It's called We Could Have Died Laughing. But, and there's much truth in that. But, you see, when I arrived on the scene, all I knew was that I was going into a place that I wasn't supposed to go into. That was what the papers had said. That's what people, relatives had said. That's what everybody said. This is the last place in the world you want to be going to. Well, of course, unbeknownst to them, and most people who knew me, is precisely the place that I was going to go to. And I went with great trepidation. I didn't know what to expect, you know? 9-headed people, I don't know. And the moment I went in, see, this is what set it all. I walked into the room, into the apartment, and everything was in a flurry of activity. For those who can remember, prior to these days of having all this kind of modern stuff, there was a Gestetner machine. If you remember what a Gestetner machine was, someone was rolling on this Gestetner machine, and there was an old typewriter, and I mean an old typewriter, and I think you still have it, a Royal. Click, 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 click. Somebody was going on it, and I walked in, and Joan was cooking a big pot of chili. And everybody was, Lynn Burroughs was there at the table, and Carol Oliver was being Carol. And everybody was doing something, and Joan looked up at me and says, "What do you do?" "No, who are you?" I said, "Walter, what can you do?" "Can you type?" And I said a little, and I didn't know how to type. But there was something that had to be done. And that was the greatest thing in the world for me, because without being judged, without being, except for, can you do something? And what it was that I could do was obviously of value. Now mind you, I was teaching at this time. I was teaching. But it was like heaven for me. And that was the opening for this. I had all this stuff inside me bottled up. I had been watching since I was about 2 years old. I grew up watching in New Glasgow. I watched. I had gone through various things. For example, I can give you many examples, but I'll give you one. I was in grade 7, 1954. By that time, I had gained a little bit of notoriety for being able to speak a little, because the year before I won a speaking contest. And I had done my first play, at which time I had decided I'd be an actor, but never told anybody, but that's another story. But we're in grade 7, and they're having auditions for the school play. And they asked me to come down to the auditorium and read for a part. Now, the part was for Santa Claus. So I go in and I take the paper and I do my little reading. And I leave. But now I left and I went to the washroom, which was to the left of the stage, and the teachers who were going to be deciding who was going to play the part were down in front of the stage and a little curtain around them. They didn't see me go to the washroom. They thought I had left. Well, I came out of the washroom and I was walking behind the curtain and they were discussing the play. And I heard the teacher say, and it was my favorite teacher. And she said, well, Walter definitely gave the best reading, but, well, but you know, it's the role of Santa Claus, and that's all I needed to hear. I knew exactly what they meant. And so I went on to my room. I never told anybody. They gave me another little role in it. I did it. But in a strange way, looking in hindsight, as I did many years later, back at that, I understood that I was experiencing something that would take on huge shape years later when I actually was in the business. It stored in there and stayed, and then coupled with many other things that happened up to the point that I went to Barrington Street. All this stuff was in there like this. And suddenly I had a place where not only could I talk about it, but all I had to do was say one line and everybody had the whole story. And could support me, say yeah, and give me another story to go with it, and another one, and I was home. I was home. And I keep saying the Nova Scotia Project, there are those up here who know the Nova Scotia Project. The Nova Scotia Project was the social political activist organization that Rocky and Joan founded here, and it was a prototype for so many people. Remember the wing of the Nova Scotia Project. They remember Quacha House, and you know, Quacha House was sheer heaven, but Quacha House was part of Nova Scotia Project. The Nova Scotia Project was huge. It did everything. It was really the political wing of everything. And from housing, education, everything. And there is, it provided, it was the prototype. Like I said, it was a prototype for so many departments and government organizations that developed afterwards. So many. And that's why it really has to be documented and written about. It was a huge thing in the history of this province, of this country, really.
When you were talking just now, you talked about knowing that you were going to be an actor. And knowing that you had something to say and to share and to get it out there. And then when you hit Barrington Street, your ability to get it out there. So many people think of you as an actor. I've always thought of you as an educator. But when we talked the other day, you talked about your acting as your activism.
Yes. Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, you're right in saying educator, because when I'm really honing in, when people ask me, well, what are you? I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. I always was a teacher. I will always be a teacher. The acting to me was my lesson plan. The stage became my classroom. All through my life, all I've ever done is change classrooms from one to the other, but it was always to teach. Now, as far as my acting is concerned, the teaching drive really has propelled everything to the point where when I choose to do a role, and I get into a lot of conversations with a lot of my friends about this. Fortunately, my agent knows me very, 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 very well. And so he understands I can't do a play. I can't do a play or play a role that doesn't advance what I believe. I don't condemn anybody for choosing to do things the way they choose it. We all have to do that. But I have to live with me. And as I would tell people, and tell them even now, you see, when I am doing a play, when I'm presenting something, if what I'm presenting, even though it is a character I'm playing, that character is advancing ideas, and if those ideas are counter to what I have lived and taught all my life, it's always in the back of my mind. I could be, 5,000 miles away from Halifax, but in here, it's like, what would they think? And a few years ago, this is what brought it really home to me. I was down in Scotia Square. I just happened to come in. And I was down there, and I can't remember exactly who it was, but one of my former pupils was there. I bumped into him with his son and his grandson. And he was going to introduce me to his son. A couple of things really stayed with me. Now, I had taught him in 1961. East Preston, Partridge River School, grade 5. And he's saying, this is my teacher, this is Mr. Borden. And he was suddenly this little boy again in 1961. And his son was looking like, great. And he said to me, after his son and grandson went off into the store, he said to me, I wanted my son to meet you because I wanted him to meet the teacher who was always true to what he believed in. That blew my mind. It really did. Because he remembered after all those years. That's why when I do a role, I'm saying to myself, now, if if what's coming out of my mouth, and I'm convincing these people about this character, what would they say? That everything that I had said for all those years was a lie. And I can't do that. Which is why I won't do commercials. As I told my agent, unless it's a public service commercial, I'll do it. But I'm not selling you a car. Because I don't believe in that aspect of capitalism, okay? I can't do that. I mean, I understand why things are. And it's not the fact that someone should or shouldn't buy a car. But I know how little it takes to produce something and how much they're being charged for it, and I understand that whole system. Well, I say, hey, this is the world I live in, but I don't have to support it. And I don't have to take and use what I have been given to help Ford Motor Company. Why should I do that? A lot of my friends can go along with that, but my friends don't have to live my life.
I'm going to say some sort of one-worders and let you talk.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah, okay.
Expo 67.
Oh, God. Once again, back to Quacha House. The beautiful thing about any organization like that was the spontaneity that was allowed. And when you're given free rein to just do, it's amazing what you will do. We never ever thought we can't do something. I mean, it wasn't in the books. I did just for a little minute. But Finney's used to be down on Barrington Street. And Finney's decided, well, they didn't decide, after a group of us went down there and badgered these poor people so badly because we needed a piano and shamed them into giving the piano. Well, what they did was they dragged us up to 5 stories up there, and there was a piano up there, this old battered up piano, and told us we could have it if we could get a, this was one of those old pianos that are like 3 tons, you know. How you gonna get it down? Okay. Within 15 minutes, this group raged up there, got this piano, I mean, scared half the customers, half to death, and coming downstairs. It was terrible, but we got the piano. You know, we would need paint and things. There was on Gaudigan Street, there was a hardware store. Go on, tell those people we need a little bit of paint. Rocky would say, go do this. And we'd be scared to death. But they, oh yeah, you can do it, go on. Yeah. So we go and tell these people, well, we need a few nails. Wait, we need a few of this. We need a can of paint. We leave with maybe 10, 15 cans of paint. Bags of nails. And it wasn't that we were bamboozling people, really. We didn't look at it that way. It was just that something had to be done. And you found that if you present, they'd be there. Sometimes it was just to get rid of us, but that's beside the point. The thing was, it was for a good cause. We learned all that. Now, Expo 67. We knew that Expo 67 was going on, and we knew that the government was pouring tons of money out there. How are we going to get some of that? Well, okay. We knew that there was a pavilion, the youth pavilion. And the youth pavilion was going to bring in acts from all over Canada of youth. Well, we certainly had youth because Quacha House was the youth wing. Okay, let's put together a concert. So we did. They flew us up. Most of us had never been on a plane before, carried on something terrible on that plane too, as I remember. Joan and I were there, well, I was there to help with the production, but we were also chaperones. It was, the short and long of it is, we went to the youth pavilion, we performed at the youth pavilion, and drew the biggest crowd of the year at the youth pavilion at Expo. That's what we did. But we didn't, you know, it was just, you did these things. Believe sometimes that we did the things we did, but it was this huge energy that was there, and it was a directed energy, and it wasn't that we were just doing stuff like I'm describing here. No, what went on at Quacha House was literally it was literally putting into action the thesis that it takes a village to raise a child. That's what was going on at Quacha House. And people came to believe, because they did not believe it in the beginning. Hey, that's another story. But there came a time when people were pushing their children to get into Quacha House, because you were going to be disciplined in Quacha House. You didn't run rampant. You were taught many things. You were taught personal deportment. You were taught how to speak. You were taught how to conduct yourself in large forums. So we would take groups, as we did, to conferences across the country. Student Union for Peace Action. Up at the, I mean, all these, and these were inner city kids who had never been, hey, and stand up and speak. Stand up and speak. But know what you have to say and how to say it. But don't back down from saying it either, okay? And to the kids' credit, great credit, they had to often deal with animosity between themselves and their families, because what they were learning in Quacha House was diametrically opposed to what they were supposed to be doing at home. And yet, in hindsight again, looking at it from way down the road, you look, the very people who you say the parents and whatever relatives of these young people who gave such problems now present themselves as part of the organization that developed. They weren't even anywhere near. But that's another story. God love them. We did our job, obviously, and we did it well. So, roundabout way, but that was all part of how we got to Expo 67 too.
Music, acting, activism, all important. I'm going to mention another name. Stop looking at my tablet.
Oh, no, I'm not. I was looking away.
When I was listening to you and Mom talk the other day, you said a name, although it's not one I'm familiar with, but I'm going to say it. Eric Perth.
Oh, Eric Perth. Eric was the, I guess you'd be called like the general manager or whatever, who ran the artistic wing of the Rebecca Cohen. He was responsible for bringing in all the acts and things there. And one day, he got a message. He wanted to see Joan, and that was the other thing. That the organization that was prevalent with Quacha House and with Nova Scotia Project. Nobody ever went alone. You always took somebody. You dragged somebody with you. Somebody who was going to learn something, someone who could assist, but always, 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 it's always about teaching. So what ended up was Joan goes over, so let's go. Okay. Joan, myself, and dear Wilma. Over we go. And we sit down with Eric. And Eric, to put it succinctly, his question was, how could he get more black people to attend the what was going on at the Rebecca Cohen. He said, how do we get more people from the community? And we said, well, it's simple. Just give us something we want to see. Oh, is it that simple? Yeah, it's that simple. And that's exactly what he did. He brought in, that's how we got Harry. And how we first met Harry. Brought Harry in for a week that time.
Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte. He brought in the Alvin Ailey dancers. He brought in Sonny Brown McGee. He brought in Bill Cosby. He brought in so many groups like Voices Incorporated. He brought in Jesse Norman. Jesse Norman, just before Jesse went into the stratosphere, the audience grew and grew and grew. This was Eric Perth, and of course, as always happens with someone with that kind of power, they got rid of Eric. You know.
Maybe they got rid of us.
And they certainly did. But we made some brilliant contacts, you know, because the contacts we made with Harry stayed forever. The contacts we made with Odetta made her end up saying, hey, she had a Nova Scotia family. And I talked with Odetta right up until the time she died. And this was her family. This was her family. And so... And these people had a tremendous effect on us. Tremendous effect. We know the effect that Harry had. Good Lord have mercy. You know, to the greater community, they couldn't believe that. Where is this man? Where this man is sitting up at 2764 Windsor Street with a whole bunch of neighborhood kids around him. That's the, you know, they couldn't connect those things together. We took it, as Odetta said many years later, the 49th parallel was just aligned. It meant nothing to us. The family was on the other side of the fence. That's how we looked at it, and that's how they looked at us. And so, in a lot of ways, our action, whether it be with them, or be with the Panthers or whatever, was always north-south. Far more than east-west, because our thinking was very American. It just was. And when I say American, I'm talking about Black America. We knew what they were saying. They knew what we were saying, and why shouldn't they? We're the family. This is what happened to us. That's what we tell them. You wanted to know? We disappeared for 200 years, but here we are. And, you know, it's like with any family, you have a brother or sister that leaves the house and they're gone for a whole bunch of years. Their life develops in a way that has to be consistent with how they're living, and you do yours. So when you come back together, what you remember, first and foremost, is not the differences that happened in the intermediate years, but the genesis from which you come. What's the root? What's the root? When Joan and I first met Odetta to talk to her, here's what happened. She was extremely gracious, wonderful, but it was like on the other side of the table, until in the conversation, maybe about 20, 30 minutes into the conversation, going back and forth, something was said, and Joan made a comment. But in making the comment, she used an old saying that we use in the community, whatever it was. And Odetta went like this. She said, "You say that too?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "We say that, and we grew up with that." And that's all it took. The floodgate just opened, just like that. We had found the thing, the key that opened the door, and then everything is like that. And that's why we have this north-south thing. The only thing that kept us apart in ideology and thinking was just the fact that we had to deal with things in a very specific way. When we got here, we had to deal with a French and an English mentality.
Yeah.
And we did it very well because we are extremely good actors. And you know, we could adopt Victorian attitudes or along with the best of them. And as a matter of fact, my mother used to say when growing up, you know, well, their tea, they have their little teas or whatever. Yeah. Now they might not be able to have their crumpets and tea at exactly 3, but by 5 o'clock, you know, they're going to have their tea. They get it in there somewhere in their biscuits. But it's the same thing. How we adapt. And when we take away the adapted part and go hone in right to who we are, which is why we could speak to Harry or whoever, hey, you know, the same thing with the Voices Incorporated. Same thing with the Panthers. If people couldn't understand, sitting down and talking with those people, I mean, there were some hot discussions went on there. You know, and this crowd here, we did not back down. This was our way of looking at it. And in many instances, they saw. They said, oh yeah, yeah. It was, Joan saying, you shouldn't be, you don't do it like that, you do it like this. You know, and take it, you know. And even to bring the world closer in was to sit and talk with Miriam, who would be coming from South Africa, and see the bonds go, because you know the story is the same, no matter where you come from. It's the same story. But, and I say that only because there's such an intense kind of thing to say, oh, but as a matter of fact, somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, and seriously, they said, you know, I was going on and on and on about President Obama, and says, do you have relatives in the United States? There's all kinds of them. You know, he said, I just wondered because, you know, you talk about President Obama down there as if he were your president. I said, he is. He is. Do you understand? It's that simple. It's the same with well so many things that I personally am interested in terms of what's going on there, because it's the same story. It makes no difference where we are.
I'm going to take you to one last name in this piece, and it's somebody that we both admired, somebody who gave me my first job as the first black usher in front of house at Neptune Theater, John Neville.
John Neville. John was one of my great mentors. It's interesting you might say that, because it reminds me of another conversation that I had very recently with someone talking to me about they said, well, you know, you're very opinionated. And they said, but you know, what about white people who have done things? I said, well, what about them? And he said, well, do you give credit? I said, let me tell you something. We are a people who give credit where credit is due. We are very precise about that. Of course I give credit. And great credit. I know who my mentors were. I know. But it's like Muhammad Ali said, when he was being questioned by this report, this person on television. The man said to Muhammad Ali, you know, it seems as if you overlook the good that certain people do. And I said, no, don't you think that, you know, like you could tone it down? I said, listen, let's say there are 1,000 people. There are 1,000 white people, and I look at them. I know that in that 1,000 people, there is one white person who is really who's really there, who really is committed. 999 want to kill me.
No.
Now, what am I supposed to do? Weed my way through this crowd to find this one person who's going to be on my side. 999 want to kill me. It doesn't make any sense. They know who they are. I shouldn't have to find them. They come to me. I can't wade through this 999 people. I'd be dead. So what I'm getting at is, yeah, I recognize, and those whom I recognize know I recognize, because they know I'm very busy. I am very busy. John is one of these people. John Neville, I met John, I had gone to, I was working for the Black United Front. I went to a gathering that they were having at Neptune Theater, and he was just being introduced. He was going to take over the next season. And at that time, Neptune was doing Man in the Moon Marigolds, and it was an all-black cast, and Odette was there, and they were downstairs on the stage rehearsing. And so we're up in the bar area, and I said to John, well, I didn't call him John then, it was Mr. Neville. I said, Mr. Neville, I'm sitting here listening to a rehearsal down there, and certainly we in the black community are very excited because it's an all-black cast, and Odetta is there and all this. Now I said, all I want to know, is this something under your regime that we can look more forward to, or is this just a flash in the pan? And he said, and I said, is this just a fly-by-night situation? He said, and you are? And I said, I'm Walter. He said, I'm John. I said, okay. He said, well, let me tell you something, Walter. He said, my wife and I have children whom we've adopted who are the same color as you. And you know, he said, we did it before it became fashionable to do it. I said, John, well, that's all I need to hear, okay? And he came in. I didn't tell him I was an actor. I never thought about it. Months later, after he had arrived and they're getting ready to cast their first season, I get a phone call at home. And he says, is this Walter? I said, yes. He said, this is John. I said, hi, John. He said, they tell me you're an actor. And I said, yeah. He said, well, how would you like to be in my company? I said, I'd like it very much. Good, fine. And that was it. That was it. John Neville was also this type of person. I never signed a contract with John Neville. It was always a handshake.
Wow.
Always. And, you know, then we looked around. Down we go to the front of house. Oh, and he just, it was, you know, so of course you don't forget that. I mean, we stayed friends right up until the time he died. I mean, I saw John just before he made his last trip to the hospital, you know. And this is very important. We were standing on the street. I saw Caroline. I didn't see John first. I saw Caroline, and I showed it to Caroline. Caroline turned around to me, and I went up to her, and we said, John. She said, John is just over there, Walter. And he was standing by some trees just standing there. Now I knew that he was very sick by this time, and she said to me, you know, he probably won't know you. And I said, that's fine. So I go over, I said, hi, John. Hello. And said a few other little things. I said, John, I remember my days at Neptune. And he turned, Neptune? Walter? Da. How is Rocky? And we just said, and then what I noticed, we'd go so far and he'd say, and how is Rocky? And I'd say, he's really good, now what plays were you with? What did we do? Oh, I said, remember, I said, the first one to do was, the Taming of the Shrew. Yes. And he went on to describe the scene. And how is so-and-so? And he like this, so I knew it was that, and then he just stopped. But we went on for about maybe 10 minutes, and Caroline said, Walter, that's the more conversation that he's had in months. But my mind was going through many things during that conversation. I'm standing there and talking to my mentor, who could spew out Shakespeare. And it was, great.
So a question that was posed to me today was, did I see myself as a mentor? And I'm going to ask you that. Do you see yourself as a mentor?
Well, you know, I never...
That's the same kind of reaction I have. I don't know. I didn't think about it.
It's like I said in this piece. Boundaries and labels are debilitating limitations which serve at best to lock us within the convenience of others. So, okay, I'm a mentor. Why? Because that's what you call it. But as far as I'm concerned, all I'm doing is exactly what I was taught to do by those who came before me. They would expect me to do it. Like, you know, it was the same in the family. You're this age, someone's this age, everybody had a thing to do. If you didn't do it, the house would fall to pieces. The work wouldn't get done. The day couldn't happen. So therefore you do what you were supposed to do. So step outside of that, you know what you're supposed to do. You do it. They call it mentoring. That's cool. That's fine. You know, as long as the job gets done.
Is the job getting done? That's kind of one of the questions. When we talked the other day, we talked about we're going around and around and we're not hitting the core. Is the job getting done?
You know, it's...
And what is the job?
Oh, Tracey, you're asking a huge one there. Look, again, this is how I see it. In so many ways, it seems as if we've gone nowhere. In spite of the fact that people say, look how far we come. I turn right around and say, yeah, and well, look how far we've come. How far have we come? Well, we've done this and that. And then I say, well, be cool. It's incrementalism. Step by step by step. But when you have to keep making the same steps, it's one thing to go step forward. I don't mind that. But when you're making the same step, you say something's wrong. Well, for me, what is wrong is this. That, and this is only one thing, but I recently talked with some of the gang in Toronto. We are having a gab. So I said, you know what I would really love to see? I would really love to see a conference, a huge one. It has to be totally in-house. It's made up primarily of, the guests would be all psychiatrists, psychologists, black psychiatrists, black psychologists, all these people, because there is a huge thing to be understood about the depth of a psyche, or the bruised psyche that has never been done. People talk about what the residual things are from slavery. All surface. Yeah, I know this was done, and I can draw the line to why this is here. Da, 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 da. But what has not been done is to analyze to the nth degree how the psyche has been more than damaged, broken, crippled. If you don't do that, you can't A, truly identify what your problem is, your real problem. And if I can't say what my problem is, I cannot expect anybody to give me anything or whatever to rectify my sickness. I have to recognize that first. Why do I say it has to be in-house? Very simple reason. It is the patient that has to speak with the patient. We have a lot to say to each patient before we go out and say, okay, now we have written down and determined that we know how to correct it. Why? Because we have the people who can tell us. And the sad thing is that, look, the reason I was talking about this in Toronto was because a friend of mine wanted to go to a mental health place. And I said, I suppose that any good would be good, but what I would really like to see you do is go to a black psychiatrist. We went to take, this is about one. Oh, why? Now, you say, why is that important? I'll tell you why it's important. At one point, I decided to go to one. I thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world.
Tell me about it.
I sat down and talked, and after the first hour, and I'm paying for the, well, I'm not paying for the hospital, but I'm still paying for it. I had to spend the hour bringing this person up to a point where we could talk. Everything I said, I had to explain. I said, I should be paid. So I didn't go back.
Exactly.
But I knew that if I had gone to a black psychiatrist, we could, hey, when I said this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't have to give all this, but I had to give a whole background. Why? Well, why is this? Well, I'm thinking, why is it?
Exactly.
Well, it's because of this and this, and then we got this great big conversation going, and I'm doing all the talking. I thought, hey, you should be laying over here on this car, not me. Like, you know, this is crazy. But it seems to me, not making light of it, but they need to have a massive place where we all go and just lay down on the cot and have these people. We have to do that. We have to do that. Otherwise, we're going to make these little steps and say, oh, aren't we great? You know, it's more than a little bit bothersome. It's really hurtful when after 50 years when you're being really honest with yourself and you sit there and you say, oh my God, oh, do you want to go to a meeting tonight? Well, what's it about? It's about, I went to that meeting 50 years ago.
Amen.
And they're going to say exactly the same thing.
Yep.
You know the dialogue.
Same
You know the
issues.
whole thing. The only difference is that it's a generation or 2 generations younger.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, it's new to you. It ain't new to me.
Amen.
And the sad thing is that we could talk and they'll write it all down that this is wonderful. Well, yeah, it was wonderful 50 years ago. Why didn't you do it?
Yeah. Yep.
Amen.
But that takes us into another whole, you know? But it is not cool to, you really have to get your head into a certain space in order just to get through the day sometimes, you say, because you think you've wasted all that time.
Yeah.
That's what you think. That's what I think. And then I'll look at somebody. It'd be somebody who is 18 or 19, and they're just filled with, and I say, take a breath. Take a breath. Because I can't turn away. I can't, because I know that everything that they are hoping for and that they're turning to me for, if I say no, that might be the last. And I do it. I do it. Would I like to go on a vacation? Yes. Yes, a very long vacation. Ain't been one for 60 years. But anyway,
You can't stop. It's very
saints
interesting.
have tried.
It's very interesting because I had asked you at the house, I said, you know, what is the message you would leave for my boys? What do you want to tell them? What is it that they need to be doing? And when we talked about, especially when I sit down, like I have the luxury when Walt comes home of sitting down with him and my mom, and I usually just sit there and say a word that gets them going. And they're the funniest couple in the world. They talk probably about once a month, and the phone rings, and the conversation starts from where it left off last time. And they just, they have these stories to tell. But then when I look, I think, they're tired. They've been doing this work that we're continuing to do, this battle, this struggle. Even now when we look at the African Nova Scotian community and we look at the disconnect, where it's expected that we'll all speak with one voice. And we have different ideas, different ways of seeing things, different ways of attacking things, whether it be education or politics or whatever. And when I listen to the conversations at home and I think about what is it that you're imparting to us, to me, to my boys, to young people, to people who've been walking that same road with you over the years. Your story from being one of 12 in New Glasgow, to being on Barrington Street, to editing my schoolwork, Walter's vicious with a red pen, to, you know, that whole journey. So when we sat down tonight, we started with, at 3, I wasn't hearing what you had to say, and often you were my primary, babysitter. When I hear they leave you behind and you take care of, but we're now 50 years later, and what is it that we need to hear?
I want to say a little something to the folks of the diaspora, aka the family. We got some business here. So, black and brown and beige and tan, cafe au lait and cocoa, dark light, damn near white, cinnamon and honey. Let's head up to the village. Don't suck your teeth, don't cut your eyes, or think I'll disappear. Just pick your lips up off the ground and give me your attention. And don't waste your time and mess around trying to ignore me. I mean your thoughts. I mean your dreams. We are stuck like white on rice. I'm the mirror of your, well, I'm you. And I'm here to tell you that I woke up this morning with my mind. And that was an accomplishment because I thought I'd up and lost it. Went and slipped into oblivion when my last bedraggled nerve was played upon, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick of priming for the marathon, tired of listening for the gun, sick of knowing that the race was lost before it had been run, tired of hearing that my efforts would receive their just rewards, sick of hearing that old bullshit all my life. That's the mantra of the former generation, and is still a lie that falsely falls from the lips of their successors. So I have learned what's in the cat is also in the kittens. And the nature of their game is to keep me in a box that can't contain me. Keep me running on that same old world worn out treadmill. And if luck is on their side, I will surely lose my mind. I caught an image of myself the other night. And sitting on my shoulders, I saw reason and excuse. Excuse was busy painting a big grin across its face while packing a survival kit to get me through tomorrow. A bag of guilt, a pound of trust, some instant understanding, a box of turn the other cheek and one of look the other way, a packet of forgiveness, and a jar of that's reality. But reason said, hey, fool. I am going on vacation. I am taking me a rest. I'm going to let you ride these rails all by yourself. I've told you now 1,000,000 times, observe a little something. Take a stand, speak a speak, and call it as you see it. Stop acting like your will is free and that you're master of your fate. Your ass is quite securely placed in lockdown while you're convinced you're in a private suite. A spectator sports the game that you're involved in, so let me make this clear. That is not you who's cheering in the bleachers. That's you who's in the headlock in the ring. You are the entertainment. And speaking of reality, that state of random action without thought, understand it well. Sometimes it's nothing more or less than a barrier of delusion that strives to keep you out of touch with the source of your perfection. Now you can go so far and even call it preference. But please do not adorn it with the cachet of reality, because there just ain't nothing real about that shit. So forget about an SOS. Start sending out an SMA. Save my ass. Goodbye. So I organized my psyche while I checked out my appearance as I stepped out my front door to greet the day, and wondered how much time would slip on by before I saw some person choose to stand instead of sitting next to me on an overcrowded streetcar, when the only empty seat was right beside me. Before I would dissolve into a stressed and feigned indifference and tell myself how glad I was to have that extra space, but knowing that's how hurt will always find some scapegoat in the shit that's from a discontented place. Before someone would deign to sit beside me, but try to change that inch of space lying there between us into a line of demarcation like a 6-lane city highway, or render me invisible and try and shove me through the wall. Before I would explode into a rage, while everybody seemed to get an urge to check their watches or rivet their attention to some happening on the street, including you, who look like me, but who sat there with a fervent wish that I would disappear, or that you could change from ebony to ivory, and pretending all along that you didn't have a clue about my problem, or that you hadn't just endured the same reception which had greeted me. The answer is, that took about 10 minutes. I wondered how much time would slip on by before a couple of family folk would come ambling down the street, all full of this and some of that, with Anglo-Saxon friends in tow, and spy me with their telescopic vision, before they went on red alert, and their misplaced, displaced, unplaced self-assurance tottered like a candle pin battered by a bowling ball, before their heads went spinning round so fast they could be actors in The Exorcist, and locking at an angle that obscured me from their sight, before words kept flying out their mouth at 25 per second, and their white friends would just look at them as if they had up and lost their minds, which they had. Before we'd get that game worked out and agreed to let it slide, and they'd think that they'd made it through, till they had gone about a half a block, and encountered some poor down and out who was looking for some change. And as they cocked an attitude and looked the other way, he just up and yelled out, "Fuck yourself, cheap niggers," and their Gucci briefcase, blackberry disposition, their Prada-footed covered girl pretensions would just melt into the sidewalk, because they would know that he had said that same old shit to everybody else who looked like them. And that's the point. No matter what their station, high or low, to the chickens who come home to roost, a spade is just a spade and nothing more. The answer is, that took about an hour, and I needed to escape. So I rushed back to my house and turned on my TV and saw a sister in a 12-inch skirt with her nipples climbing out her blouse and her pussy playing peekaboo with half the nation, while her Nordic aspirations fell in wisps across her eyes and cascaded in silk tresses down her back. And she flipped and tossed her head with such conviction that I knew she thought that shit was really hers. And she purred that she had never known rejection, could not recall of being buked and scorned. Oh, she loved the world and everybody in it. And her purpose in her life was to set a good example for the girls who might be coming on behind her. Then she went on home, took off her weave, and threw it in the drawer. She took her 3-inch polished nails and she threw them in the drawer. She took her phony titties and she threw them in the drawer. She took her padded booty and she threw it in the drawer. And then she jumped into her bed. And her man jumped in the drawer. He knew where all the good stuff was. She had up and lost her mind. Then I came upon a brother as he slouched across the screen with his $1,000 sneakers and a do-rag round his head. Rings and things, all kinds of bling. Half a dozen diamond studs sparkling in his ears. Golden chains and midnight shades. Big old silver belt that fought a losing battle to keep his pants up on his ass. He struck a pose and he grabbed his crotch and he barked, "Yo, listen up." Then he monotoned some bullshit about his bitches and his hoes and asked me 50 times or more, "You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?" And I'm thinking, come, they have got you on an auction block. How the hell should I know what you're saying when you don't even know? And if you do, then take the time to learn how to say it.
Right.
And don't be telling me that I can't talk your talk because you are talking ghetto. We both know what's happening here. You are talking shit. And somebody ought to tell you that those bitches and those hoes that you refer to are members of our women folk who saved us from extinction.
Yes.
When they carried foreign nations on their backs. In short, they toted everybody's shit, including yours. So the least that you can do is to give them the respect that is denied them by the very ones who pay you to remain just what they made you, the least of everything that you can be. Then I turned in on a religious network service, just in time to see somebody get the spirit and scream about the stuff that God had told them. And I was thinking, this is sad, 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 because God ain't told you nothing. And we both know it. Somebody else done told you that God sent you a message, which they gladly passed on to you for a proper service charge, like Sanctified Western Union. When last did you pick up that phone and say, "Hey, operator, information, just pass me right on through to my creator, I'll speak my piece my own damn self, don't need no interceders on the way," and find that God ain't heard a word from them in years. Matter of fact, last time that they stuck on through, God hung up the phone. She had better ways to use her time than waste it on some hypocrites. Now, how much effort does it take for you to stop and say, "Now peace, be still, and let me know the only thing that is greater than myself"? And by the way, last time I checked, her number still was listed and it wasn't on the internet. You'll find her under Conversations Confidential. And as I sat and thought about what some have called our sad descent from Superman to man, from warrior queens and pharaohs, she-pharaohs, philosophers and kings, from masters of the intellect, a people of renown, I realized we haven't lost our minds. Our minds have been extorted. So it's time to file some charges and make a list of what's gone missing if we want to see our house restored to order once again. But don't forget, we have reached the point where much of our destruction is the product of some inside help from members of the family who haven't lost their minds. They have gone and lost their souls, and that's a tragic situation, and it has to be addressed without delay. There is a need, there is an urgency for defining who we are and who we were and who we wish to be, for knowing what we really mean when we are moved to say, can't pass the buck, can't wait around, the journey starts with me. But hell, you don't need to give a heed to anything I say. Just shrug it off. Plug your ears. I'm just a black man talking.
Amen.
When we gather in our homes and in our living rooms and in our spaces, we have that back and forth conversation. We share the stories. And it's really been my pleasure to sit here this evening and share some of the story. Because Walter's story is huge. It's many conversations around the table. It's many conversations in the community. And I'd like to thank you, Walt, for giving me some of this time and giving us some of this time so that you could share. I mean, I sat with you for 4 hours on Sunday, and we talked and talked, and we could do 4 hours more. But in this limited time that we have, this is our conversation. I would like to, if you don't mind, if there are any, if anybody has any questions or anything for Walt, because there's been so much that he's done, and many people here sitting today that he's interacted with and engaged with, maybe battled with. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, or your niece.
Yeah,
Hi, Uncle Walt. How
Hi
you doing?
there.
Good. When are you coming back to the stage and how fast?
I hope so. I truly hope so.
Can we hold you to that? Can we hold you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really, really want to perform here. It's a matter of fact.
Has anybody asked you?
Well, yeah.
well, there
but
you
I can't go ahead. Yesterday, for the very first time, I went to Citadel High School, and they did an interview there. They did the interview on the stage. That's a lovely theater. I had no idea it was there. It's beautiful theater. And I just stood there and what actors will do and go, just to see what the acoustics are, and then just stand there. And it's a space that's, well, I was surprised when they said it was 700 and some seats, because it doesn't feel like that. It's almost intimate. It's a lovely. I love to act on that stage.
Kim?
Hi, Walter.
Hi.
I would love to see you bring back Dodge Trombone.
I would too.
That is
Yeah.
the one thing I would love to see here in Halifax.
Well, I tell you,
Can you make that promise to me to bring that back and make sure I'm in it?
you know what? That's what I was just going to say.
Yes.
I will work to bring it back if you will be.
I will help you.
There you go. Oh, there you go.
That's fun.
I'll help too, Walter.
Yeah.
Walter,
Yeah.
I'll help too.
Okay. I mean, I
Yeah,
really like
yeah,
you
the
to go.
audience member saying,
Like, be nice
to help. They want it back.
Yeah, yeah. I
Can you
think
tell
of
people what God's trombones is so they can know?
God's Trombones. James Weldon Johnson wrote a piece, 12 sermons and a prayer. And what he wanted to do was to try and capture the flavor and the cadence and everything of the old black Baptist preachers. So there's the preacher and his choir, and it's total interaction. It's from the beginning to the end. And we have gorgeous memories of it because we did it several times. But the really, for me, the pinnacle production was probably, well, either one of two, when we did it in the round church. Because not only the history of the round church, but the sound that we got from starting up at the very top and then coming down outside, and it sounded like stereophonic sound, quadraphonic sound coming down and then moved up to the stage. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And the other thing.
No, it was jazz.
That was Odetta.
Odetta sang,
Yeah.
And then, for me, there's a moment, I talk about this with people, there's a moment in that production that happens. It's a play, right? However, what happens is that by the time after the choir gets up on in the choir loft, and the preacher does his first thing there, I used to watch how the audience would change into a congregation, and they didn't even know they were changing. And after that happened, take off. It just take off. Yeah, it's needed. It's very needed. I need it for one thing. I do, and I talk about it a lot.
Do you think in a country like Canada that calls itself a multicultural country, a multicultural nation, it's easy to do something, and I guess I'll call it a racial community, rather than America? Even though America is a multicultural country, you would never see that looking at it. It's American pop culture. The whole, Hollywood's too white now type of thing. I want to get your thought on that.
Well, first of all, I have a great antipathy with the word multiculturalism. Because I think that by and large what multiculturalism has done is create ghettos. And they've done it by placing a pot of money in the center of the square, and they have every group trying to get money out of this pot. It's a Canadian thing in that there is so much about, I'll wave my old flag and all like that, but I'll do it because I feel that I can say what I want to say about my country. There are so many words that Canadian society are conditioned to hide behind. They hide their worst aspects behind these glowing words, and that's why I talk about boundaries and labels. And so if I say we are a multicultural nation, to those who don't want to look any further than the word, it means, we're all one. No, not at all. All you have to do is go to any of the major cities and you just go, you want to go to this segment of this is where this group is, this is where this group is, this is this group here, and this group here, and this group here, and this group here. And they come together when there is a government-sponsored multicultural endeavor. And I'm saying, no, this is not it. This is not it. Number one,
to me, you can only have a multicultural society when it is the norm to appreciate the differences in each of those groups to the same extent. And when I know that the society, the country in which I'm living, is not set up for that, it is set up to have strata. That's how it exists. Then all this pretense towards something, and it's a huge pretense because look how much money they're pouring into it. So that's why I say I have great ambivalence about, I get a cringe every time I hear the word multicultural. It's like all those other words that come into play that are supposed to mean that we have come so far. You know?
And on that note, because we have Gordy going to perform and he's ready to perform, Walt will be around, be able to have some conversation, but at this point, Walt and I are going to move out of the way for a bit, and we're going to invite Gordon Johnson to come and do a couple of songs for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, give another big hand to Tracey doing this crowd. Now with the shake of the tambourine, get ready for GGJ. Mr. Gordy Johnson, here he comes now. Make some noise!
Ooh-wee. Hey, hey,
Yeah.
ooh-wee. Hey, hey, GGJ, GGJ, do it again. Ooh-wee. Hey, hey, ooh-wee. Hey, hey, ooh-wee. Hey, hey, GGJ, GGJ,
I'm telling you, that's everybody touchdown, and everybody else. Everybody really entertaining.
Hey, y'all ready? I'm not ready yet, but I'll with you in a minute.
Where is the time coming down?
Good job, Tracey.
Go on, Dave. I couldn't get my camera to I was supposed to stream from this guy, but I have this as a backup. So this is that's what the So,
111.
Come on, Godfather, I just want to get a picture. Oh, put your hand on it. Look, you put your hand on for me. Put my hand back on? Yeah, I gotta get a picture of you. Come on now, you look all that cute up here.
GJ.
Where we could actually have like a Sunday show. But I just want to